Okay, in the meantime, though, we got to get out to Cedar Rapids. Let's listen to this live for a bit. This is Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. He's speaking to the Iowa Republican Party at this GOP dinner. Let's watch.
Really important thing, and not everybody's going to like this, but the separation of powers was incredibly important to our founders. They believed, and they followed the teaching of Montesquieu, who said that when the legislative power and the executive power are combined in one person, there can be no liberty. James Madison wrote that the way we were going to set the government up was we were going to divide the power equally between three branches, and we were going to pit ambition against ambition. The ambition of people, men and women, to want to garner power is an insatiable sort of power that is inherent to all mankind. So we check it by having another body and group of people who don't want those people to have all the power, and we divide that power so they check and balance each other. So one of the most important powers they gave and were worried about was the power to tax. Many called it the power to destroy. They hated taxes. It was part of the reason we had the American Revolution, taxation without representation. And so when they set up our country, they said the taxes have to originate very specifically in the legislature, but they have to originate in the House of Representatives, because the House was thought to be closer to the people and the Senate was more distant. But all taxes would start in the House before they got to the Senate, before they went to the president, before they became a law. What we're having now is a debate over emergency powers of the president. I like Donald Trump. I'm friends with him. I played golf with him a dozen times. He's had the best cabinet ever. He's getting ready to have even better people. And I hope we do get rid of the Department of Education. We've been for it for 20 years, and Donald Trump's the first one with the courage to have to do it. So I'm not up here just to harangue about a person. But when we look at the Constitution of the separation of powers, I don't fear Donald Trump, but I do fear AOC declaring emergencies. And that could happen. There will be a Democrat at some point in time, hopefully not soon, but when there is, I don't want them to declare a climate emergency and say that I can't drive my car around anymore and I have to, have an electric car. I don't want the left to rule the country by emergency either. So it isn't against Donald Trump that I argue, it's against the idea that one person should make the rules for the country. Tariffs are a tax, clear and simple. He says the foreigners will pay them. But then he said yesterday that Apple's going to pay them. Apple isn't the foreigners. If Apple doesn't do his bidding, they'll have a 25% tax. That shouldn't be the prerogative of one person, even if you like the tariffs. That's not the way we do it in our country. So I continue to argue, and I argued this under Biden. I've had an emergency reform bill for many years now under several different presidents. I haven't won yet. I used to have more allies on the Republican side. I don't have as many right now. But the idea was this, that an emergency declared by the president should be approved by Congress. Because if we're going to live under an emergency, it should be approved. Why is this important? In Kentucky, I'll give you an example. During COVID, our governor did everything by royal edict. He shut down the restaurants. He shut down the schools. He shut down interstate travel. He shut down the churches, for goodness sakes. He sent the state police to take down the license plates of people going to church. How did he do it? By emergency order. So there are bad emergency orders that the other side will use, and we should be very, very wary of allowing our country to be ruled by emergency order. Doesn't mean Trump's a bad person. It means that no one should have that power. No one should have that singular power that it goes unchecked. In our state, what we finally did is we said, and see, our legislature can't call themselves back into session. Our legislature has to be called into session kind of like the days of old when the king would have to call Parliament back. He would dissolve them. They just couldn't come back. That's kind of the way we are. The state legislature can't come back. So we passed a law and said that any emergency declared by the governor is good for 30 days, and it expires unless approved by the legislature. He would have to bring us back or the emergency would expire. This is a good government division, separation of powers issue, and I think it's worth still fighting on it. I'll briefly just address the economic issue because I think it's important, and there's something very fundamental about trade that we should understand. Trade is just an extension of capitalism. If you're for laissez-faire capitalism, if you're for free markets, you have to be for trade. In the beginning, there was somebody in your village who made the shoes. All the shoes. Well, everybody made their own shoes. Then one person in the village made the shoes. Then somebody in the next county made them. Then it was somebody in the next state. We don't really care. Maybe y'all care if we make the shoes in Kentucky versus Iowa, but we got to the point where we didn't care which state we're in. And now it's become an international world where we believe that. But trade has made us rich. If you look at household income in the last 70 years, the lower class has shrunk a little bit. The middle class has shrunk a little bit. But you know what has tripled? In constant dollars, the upper class. We have gotten richer over the last 70 years. We have ups and downs. When we had inflation under Biden, the middle class got squeezed some. But the overall trend of 70 years is we're getting richer. The other thing that we're told, and this is by those who want tariffs, is we're being ripped off. We're being ripped off by China. But the fallacy is this. None of you trade with China, but virtually everybody in here trades with Walmart. You go to Walmart. Let's say the only thing they sell in Walmart is TVs and they all come from China. When you go to Walmart and you buy a TV, you're making a deal, not with China, but with the store of Walmart. Walmart may have bought them in China. But do you buy that TV if you're being ripped off? No, you wouldn't make the deal. Every trade in a voluntary free market is a mutually beneficial trade. When you go in there and if your TV's going to cost $600, you've got it in your pocket. The TV's $600. The people selling the TV want your $600, and you want the TV. And you have to make a decision that you want the TV more than your $600. All trades are mutually beneficial. But then after a while, you say, well, 1 million people bought TVs, and they all came from China, and China didn't buy anything from us. We have a trade deficit. We're being ripped off. But what you've set up is a false accounting. The only trade is between you and Walmart. You made a decision. If it's a bad trade, if you're being ripped off, you don't make the trade. This is true, and it's leading us to believe that we're always being ripped off. We have a trade deficit with Bangladesh. We will always have a trade deficit with Bangladesh. They are poor, and we are rich. The richest people in this dinner tonight all have a bigger trade deficit with Amazon than I do. The more money you have, the more you spend. Poor people don't have as much. They have less of a trade deficit. Bangladesh will never buy from us as much as we buy from them. But we're not getting poorer because we trade with Bangladesh. But these are things we're going to have to work through. We do know a couple of things historically. William McKinley, and the president refers to him often, was the king of the tariff in the end of the 19th century. He was in the Congress in 1890, and they passed the most wide-reaching tariffs that we'd had up until that time. And they had 170 Republicans, and they lost 100 seats in the next election, including McKinley was defeated. So it doesn't always lead to electoral success. When McKinley comes back as president, he actually institutes a more idea of trying to get trade reciprocal and lower trade, and some say that's what Trump is arguing for. In the 1930s, we have the Depression beginning in 29, and by 1931, we get the SmootHolly Tariff. Smoot was a 5-term Republican senator. That's a long-standing senator with a lot of, incumbency advantages. He was the author, and a guy named Hawley was a 13-term congressman from Oregon. That was the SmootHolly Tariff. They both were defeated in the next election. We went out of power for 60 years. And you think, oh, well, I'm crazy and I'm wrong on this issue. Ask the Iowa Farm Bureau what they think about trade. 25% of your agricultural products are exported. Same goes for Kentucky. The American Farm Bureau says they're for trade. So this isn't a simple issue. Is trade good for some people? Absolutely. If your industry is being protected, it's absolutely good for you. But we have to think about how it is for the whole country. If the president is successful in bringing tariffs down by sort of standing up and rattling the cage and, being a bull in a china shop, which he can be on occasion, I'll be the first to compliment him if we can make trade better and have more trade. But the proof is in the proof is in the pudding. And I don't know which way we'll go. So we will continue to have that debate. But it's important to realize that trade is proportional to prosperity. The only time the trade deficit goes down is during a recession. When we have less money and we're less rich, we buy less stuff from overseas, and the trade deficit gets smaller with China. But we've had a trade deficit every year since 1976. And people say, well, the Chinese got rich. They did. And so did we. From 1976 on, average income has been going up. It's an extraordinary thing since World War II. The wealth is amazing. If you talk about the best time to ever be alive, it's now. Without question, longevity, antibiotics, infectious disease, we're better off than we've ever been. So it's a debate that's good and worth having. It's a constitutional debate, and then it's an economic debate. We may not all agree on it, But like I say, if I can still talk with the president, hopefully I can still talk with many of you who may disagree with me on this as well. The other big issue we have of the day is the big, beautiful bill. Elon Musk is sort of taking a step back, and he tweeted out that it's hard to have big and beautiful in the same bill. And there's some truth to that. The bigger it is, the more stuff that's in it, the more room there is for good to happen and also for disagreement to happen. And I think that's what's happening now. In 2017, we passed the tax cuts, and I voted for them. What we're trying to do is make those permanent now. I completely and entirely support that, even throwing in some new things in addition. No tax on tips. Do you know whose idea that was originally? A guy named Ron Paul in 2007 went to Nevada, and he said, look at these, let's give a no tax on tips. And so I'm in favor of those things. I'd like to get all that done. I think we should, if we're going to cut taxes, even though most tax cuts bring in plenty of revenue, and that's not really a deficit problem, we need to cut spending just because we have a deficit, irregardless of whether we cut taxes. We have a $2.2 trillion deficit, and we have to be honest about this. During the election, we called it Bidenomics, Biden spending, and Biden inflation. From all the debt, all that was true. But come this spring, we voted on spending levels. And not me, but the vast majority of Republicans voted to keep the Biden spending levels. We now live under the Republican levels that are a reaffirmation of the Biden spending levels. We didn't change them at all. And the deficit at the end of September, as the end of our fiscal year, is going to be $2.2 trillion. And you say, well, what about Doge? Isn't Doge working? I'm a huge fan of Doge. I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk. The biography that Walter Isaacson wrote of him is amazing. I suggest reading it. Doge has found, some say 150, some say $200 billion in savings. We ought to institute every bit of them. But there's a rumor around, and I've been the one rattling the cage, and I'm going to be one of the reasons why they're going to eventually let us vote on it in Congress. You have to vote. If you don't vote on it, these things are sort of ephemeral. They're not going to be real. They're not going to be codified unless we vote on it. So there's been a rumor for about a month they're going to send us a $9 billion rescission package. It'll be simple majority, and only Republicans need it. I will absolutely, without question, vote for it. But I also point out that $9 billion is a rounding error in Washington. So if the deficit's supposed to be $2.2 trillion, and you want to elect good conservatives to fix the deficit of $2.2 trillion, if you cut $9 billion, the deficit will be $2.191 trillion. It's essentially the same. What they're trying to cut is also the low-hanging fruit. This should be the stuff that should take no debate, and we should pass it in a heartbeat. It's $8 billion worth of foreign aid. Raise your hands if you really want us to continue spending $2 million on sex changes in Guatemala. I don't see many hands. Raise your hand if you're for our $100,000 for a trans opera in Colombia, a trans comic book in Peru. I mean, it's insane stuff that we should all vote on. But the problem is we have Republicans circulating that around. They're not going to vote for it. This is going to be a big test vote. I saw Russ Vought, the head of OMB, on television. He said it's going to be a test vote. It is going to be a test. We tried it in the last administration. Trump sent us $16 billion, once again, a fairly small number, and we lost. We had, in the Senate, we had 48 Republicans. 2 Republicans voted with the Democrats. And we lost. We have to have virtually everybody again because it's such a close margin. But it does have to come back. And people online are like, why don't you do something? Why don't you do it? This has to be done by the White House. The way the rules are written, the Doge cuts or the rescission cuts have to come back to us. So I'm all for the $9 billion. But what we have to do is more. Somebody said today we need to do one every week. It's true. But if we do $9 billion, hopefully they'll jump to $50 billion the next time. But we have to do more. We're being consumed by this. The interest on the debt is $1 trillion. $1 trillion. I was telling somebody it's been 10 years since I was here, and I was here on Halloween. We had a Halloween party down in Des Moines, and you know what my outfit was? Solid red turtleneck with the numbers 10 trillion on it. No, 18 trillion. 18 trillion. That was supposed to be the scariest thing I knew. That was the deficit, the debt at that time. 18 trillion. We're double that since I've been here. In the last 10 years, we have gone from 18 trillion to 36 trillion. It's crowding out everything else. And this is at still a fairly low interest rates. But interest rates have begun to climb. And if they were to double or triple, which they have been that high before, it'll crowd out all spending. You're going to see chaos. If the government has to pay 9% on a $36 trillion debt, you're going to see chaos. We have to do something about it. But this is where I'm sort of the one pushing against people who are afraid. They say, if you talk about entitlements or you touch entitlements, we'll lose all of the elections. Well, I've been talking about raising the age of Social Security since 2010 when I won. And the people say, do you hate old people? And I say, no, I aspire to be an old person. I want to have Social Security. I want to have Medicare. I want everybody to have it. But you're not going to have any of it if it goes bankrupt. You have to gradually raise the age of both. And I think if you're honest with people and tell people, I want Social Security to survive for my kids and my grandkids and for me. But you got to raise the age or it won't survive. I think that's just being honest. I don't think that automatically means everybody will hate you and you'll be defeated in the election. But we've taken Social Security off the table. We're not going to look at it at all. We've done the same for Medicare. And now there's a look at Medicaid. And they're saying, oh, we can't do Medicaid. That's a third rail also. If you don't do it, there's not anything left to go after. There's food stamps, too, and they have to be gone after also. But the main entitlements that I've just listed comprise all of your taxes. You pay $5 trillion in taxes, and the 4 or 5 entitlement programs consume all of that. The budget that we vote on, which is about $1.8 to $2 trillion, is all borrowed. The military and the non-military discretionary is all borrowed because the entitlements soak up everything. I mean, is it cruel to say that healthy people shouldn't be on food stamps? Should your healthy 21-year-old kid in college be on food stamps? It was never for single people. Food stamps was for mothers with children who couldn't work. And if we limited it to that, probably half the people on food stamps wouldn't be on food stamps. Should we let you get Coca-Cola on food stamps or Pepsi? I mean, that's crazy. And it's one of the good things about this administration. I'm a fan of Robert Kennedy. I've talked to him many times, and the president. They're talking about doing this administratively. I have a bill to exclude it. In some communities, 20% of the food stamps are going to sugared drinks. I don't even mind if we leave the diet drinks on, finally. They're probably not healthy either, but the sugar drinks are killing America. Who are the most unhealthy people in America? Those on Medicaid. We're not helping them. We're feeding them bad food and giving them bad health insurance. We can do better, but we have to be more bold. Obamacare expanded Medicaid. They added like 15, 20 million people to Medicaid. Who did they add? People above the income level. They added people that had more income that used to not be on it. They also added healthier, able-bodied people. Right now, the federal government pays Obamacare. Here's how great Obamacare was. The federal government paid 100%. Well, what state doesn't want free Medicaid and free health care for people if the federal government pays for all of it? It changed over a couple of years, and still it's 90% federal government, 10% local government. It needs to go to 50-50 like the rest of us. People say the state legislature will hate you. I hope not. But the thing is it needs to. Why? Because you don't have a printing press in Des Moines. We've got a printing press, and that's all of our problems. You talk about what government works, your county government largely works, and your state government works. Why? They don't have a printing press. They have certain rules. They can borrow money, but there is some limitation. They actually know they have a limitation. If you go to your county government, you ask them how much money comes in, Dallas County or Polk County, and they'll say, $10 million. How much do you spend? $10 million. You spend what comes in. That never happens in Washington. I had a conversation with a Democrat counterpart on a committee, and I was saying, well, if you want this and you think it's really necessary, why don't we see what we can take away some money and spend an offset to pay for what you want? He said, oh, no, we shouldn't have to make any choices like that. I said, well, I thought that's what we were elected to make choices. If you have enough money to pave 10 roads and you want to pave 20 roads, you pave the 10 worst roads and then you come back the next year. That's what a local government does. None of that's happening in Washington, but it's literally out of control. But if we take all this stuff off the table, I promise you we're nibbling at the edges. Even all the DOGE cuts, which I'm for, if we did $200 billion, it's still a small number. We're still at a $2 trillion deficit. It doesn't add up. We've got to do something. So on the big, beautiful bill, my main objection to it is they're going to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. Before this, no conservative has ever voted to raise the debt ceiling. People did, mostly Democrats and the establishment Republicans.
Okay, so Senator Rand Paul there in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, talking about a number of topical items in the news, including the big, beautiful bill, what he's going to do with it, what he's urging his Senate colleagues on the Republican side to do with it, also the tariff policy that has gone back and forth in the federal courts just in the last 24 hours. We're going to get to all of that at the bottom of this hour, talking about its impact on the overall economy, on consumers especially. But in the meantime, we do have to take a quick commercial break. We're going out to New York City because take a look at this gorgeous twilight view there in Midtown. Today was supposed to be Manhattanhenge. That's where the sunset aligns perfectly with the street grid, but some cloud cover getting in the way. We'll see you after the break.